All right, we're gonna start off. We're gonna start off with the acolyte. Acolyte. I'll be okay. It's a long day for me. So the Acolyte Showrunner explains why you need a non-fan in the Star Wars writer's room. Okay, now I saw a little bit about this over on the web. People were talking about, like, how do you have a person that didn't read anything about Star Wars writing Star Wars? So let's read this article. Star Wars, the Acolyte Showrunner Leslie Headland explains in a recent interview why one writer in the show's writer's room isn't a Star Wars fan. Okay. In a recent interview, Star Wars Acolyte Showrunner Leslie Headland explains that the showrunner's room included one writer who wasn't a fan of Star Wars. The Acolyte also has already sparked intense interest amongst audiences as the next debut is upcoming Star Wars TV show. While, of course, not all the details of the Acolyte have been revealed, the Acolyte full trailer breakdown has been given and viewership a glimpse into it. Okay, so in the interview with the THR, the Acolyte Showrunner Leslie explains that the decision to include a writer without the same prior knowledge of Star Wars, Headland shares, that is, she wanted them to be questioning the show's narrative, which someone without a Star Wars background should be able to do more easily. Okay, so let's read this. Okay, I just thought it would be good to have a perspective of a person that literally never seen Star Wars until she was in the room. And she also said to me, why do you want me in this room? I've never seen Star Wars. I have no idea. I think there's a dog in it, but I don't know anything. And I was like, first of all, you're an incredible writer. I can just see this. Oh, first of all, you're an incredible writer. But that's why I want you here. I want you in questioning the narrative. I don't want myself, who's a lifelong fan, to just be relying on particular references in order to create emotional beats. I want the emotional beats to be earned and checked by someone that isn't a super familiar with it. Just off of that question, or after that statement, I don't know, man. I look at this completely different. I get it. Coming from a standpoint, sometimes when you're in something so deep, right? Like, you love something so much, you're writing something, it's hard to step back and see there's any flaws or problems with that, right? So you need someone from the outside to come in. So to kind of check you on your stance of what, does this make sense? As a bare base of, you write something and someone goes, oh yeah, that would make sense. Character A and B interacting with character C, that seems like it would be good. But it's also in context, right? If the person that's never ever done a haircut, do you want that person to cut your hair? If the person did an interview with someone, I said this last night, if I was doing an interview with somebody but never read their book or watched their films or did anything, would I be a good person to interview that person? I don't know. Within context of certain things, if this is a brand new film, and when I mean brand new, I'm not talking about a brand new film with an established IP. If this is a brand new film, and you want to bring in someone that doesn't know anything, like you've never made a James Bond film before, or you never made a Star Wars film, and you're adapting it from one entity to the next, like a Harry Potter, right? The books into the movies. And then you kind of sit down and go, well, I never read the books. Have an outsider come in while people did read the books. They can give an outside perspective. But I think it's different when it's an established already movie, right? And or book, okay, where you're making a sequel. And now you have these attached characters. You have these attached beats across the thing. And yes, the Acolyte takes place before the Phantom Menace, right? But at the same time, I feel like if you don't know anything about Star Wars, then you probably shouldn't be in the writer's room, because you might suggest something and someone goes, oh, that's great. And then it goes in there, sort of like the line, I don't know if they say it in this article, where they say that the Sith Lords from the Phantom Menace have been gone for a millennium. And yet now, in this Acolyte, it's not 1,000 years ahead. I think it's like 100 years before Phantom Menace, right? It might even be a couple decades before the Phantom Menace. So there's a major loophole problem here. This is the same thing that we read about last week, about talking about the Holdor maneuver, right? Where you're just shooting through things because that technology is already there, or that the rebels already knew about the base, but no one ever told them about how tracking works for hyperspeed, for hyperspeed, right? So it's like, little things like that throw off the canon. And then when people are not super fans, and you can say this is gatekeeping or whatnot, I don't really think it's gatekeeping for the fans. I think it's gatekeeping for, this is what the lore is, and we don't want the lore to change. We want you to add to the lore. Don't break stuff down so it fits your new story. right? Stick with the story. I always bring back to the example of in New Hope, when Obi-Wan's talking to Luke Skywalker and says, "You knew my father?" "Yes. I fought with your father in the Clone Wars." We know nothing about the Clone Wars. Just a throwaway line, okay, back then. But then later down the road, 20 years later, right, they made the Clone Wars, okay? Now, with the line of, "I fought with your father in the Clone Wars," and then if you made a movie in the Clone War era but never showed the actual Clone Wars, and it was a different battle, you'd be like, "Wait a minute, is this the Clone Wars he was talking about? This is not the Clone War battle," right? It would be really weird because it was established, just from a little line, okay, that it was connected to the same universe. So, let me continue reading here. While some might be surprised at Headland's decision to rational, it chooses to make sense, particularly to give Star Wars trajectory lately. Now, the Acolyte story still had to work outside the of Star Wars. Now, recent Star Wars has begun trending on the direction of making the various movies and TV shows more accessible to those of the franchise who aren't entirely caught up on the recent additions. This is the same sort of problem that Marvel has. Like, if you want to watch Marvel's Avengers, you can watch it as a standalone movie, or like Endgame, but you would get more context from that if you watched all the other movies ahead of time, right? So while viewers might struggle with watching the sequel trilogy without having seen the original prequel trilogy, for example, shows that that Andor essentially built to successfully outside the mainstream Star Wars timeline. This is particularly helpful given that the struggle of the animated shows have had gained the same level of recognition and viewership as the live-action shows and movies. Yeah, but Rogue One and Andor, right? Rogue One is attached to New Hope. New Hope, how did they get the plans? This is the movie, how they got the plans. And then now Andor is the prequel to Rogue One, right? So they're all connected, and they have to kind of fit that narrative of what the story is. Now, this is particularly helpful given that the struggle of animated shows, I already read that one. It says, ultimately, this is a smart move for the Acolyte. While some bristle at the idea of non-fan having a sway in the writer's room, it isn't as though everyone in the room is unfamiliar with the franchise. Really, the writer offers the opportunity to spot gaps, confusing plot points, and other issues that also may be less visible to someone with the background required. Having a non-fan in the room, as Headland said, will allow broader audiences to enjoy the show, giving the Acolytes longevity. I agree, and I understand what she's saying, right? Again, have that person step back, that's not included, can not be attached, has no attachment to what this character A or B or whatever, or what the story is overall, and just sit back and go, does this make sense? And then goes, well, this doesn't make sense because of this. And they go, well, it does because in Star Wars, and she goes, oh, okay. At that point, though, if the writers that know what they're talking about for Star Wars and the person that doesn't know what they're talking about with Star Wars, doesn't that make it more just inconvenience? Because this person's like, well, this wouldn't make sense. Well, it does because of this. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that because I didn't watch the movies or read the books. So it says it's encouraging to see Star Wars take a new approach. In fact, because it means that the franchise is looking truly to expand beyond the Skywalker saga. While some of the dismay at the news of the Skywalker saga was ending, and while Skywalker was always to be drawn for avid fans, the Acolyte is signaling that there is so much more to tell. By having a non-Star Wars fan in the writer's room, Star Wars The Acolyte will support the fact that Star Wars can go the distance without Anakin, Luke, or Leia. Now, I have a question. If in any way, shape, or form, okay, they bring in the, Plagueis or Yoda or anybody of that sort, if Yoda shows up in this show in any way, shape, or form, then you're connecting it to the Skywalker saga. I'm just saying, if they took this show and made it 1,000 years before, you wouldn't be connecting anything. You have a fresh slate to do stuff, but they didn't do that. Okay? So we'll see, right? If they, in any way, shape, or form during this show, connect it, if Yoda shows up, if they mention Yoda, if they do anything, if Yoda's just a young Padawan at the time, which he wasn't because he's like 800 years old during Empire Strikes Back. He's like, 780 years old during the Phantom Menace. So he's like 600 years old. He knows what the hell he's doing during the time frame of this. If they bring him into the show, then all of this that they're saying, well, they don't have to connect it to the Skywalker saga, is bullshit. Okay? They could have had an opportunity where they could have 100% made a different story They could even tell a completely different story that's not attached to anything of the Skywalker saga. They could have not attached anything to the Old Republic. They could have made their own stories ahead of time and made it a clean slate. Or they have the ability to make a story well after episodes 7, 8, and 9. Not 30 years. They could do 100 years, 1,000 years into the future, make a story, and then tell that story. But they choose not to, right? They choose not to. These are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. What do you think of the Acolyte Showrunner leading or having one writer in the writing room that has nothing to do with Star Wars? Know anything about Star Wars? Never watched Star Wars? Do you think that's a smart move? Do you think that's a bad move? Let me know in the comment section down below. Please make sure you share, like, and subscribe. And if you like what we do here, check out some of our other videos. Thanks for watching.